Gonna be fun.
I'm gonna make you wait. Let's go through Melvin's
right.
team. We talked about Shedinja, but it's there alongside Incineroar, Xerneas, Salamence, Groudon, and Tapu Fini. Jamie Boyt bringing the most traditional team I've seen all weekend.
Really?
Salamence, Salazzle, Breloom, Necrozma of the Duskmane variety, Tapu Koko, and Xerneas. Nothing out of the ordinary here for me. I don't know what you guys think.
I mean, I've had the pleasure and or misfortune of playing against a Breloom multiple times in the past, and it's just one of those very interesting Pokemons. It's kind of frail. Usually you want to run it with something like a Focus Sash so you don't get knocked out in one hit, especially in a format where Pokemon like Groudon and Incineroar are so popular, as we see on Melvin's side of the field. Gets access to Spore, which could be interesting. It also gets access to fighting type moves because it is a grass fighting type Pokemon. So Bullet Punch, or not Bullet Punch, excuse me, Mach Punch would be the fighting type move that I was looking for there. And it certainly can help you win games, but you know, I also want to touch on the Salazzle as well on Jamie's side of the field, since I think the Salazzle is going to be a bit more relevant in this matchup going into this game one. It is a fire poison type Pokemon, and it's very fast and can hit Pokemon like the Xerneas we see on Melvin's side of the field very hard, and if it carries a fire type move, could also threaten that Shedinja. And I think going into this game one, Jamie has to be very careful that he doesn't, you know, lose all of the Pokemon on his team that can sort of damage that Shedinja, because then we might see something like we saw last round, where Shedinja shows up and then it's just game over.
I honestly think Shedinja is just not a good selection here. Looking at the plethora of options Jamie has, something like the Salamence, the Salazzle as well. You know, there may be options elsewhere in the team depending exactly how things are trained. Might be time to leave it at home. So Melvin may be forced to leave one of his favorite Pokemon behind, but the rest of his team is certainly solid enough to get through that without any concerns as well. And the leads have taken the field, the players sinking into their chairs, getting ready for this match. It's going to be Incineroar and Xerneas for Melvin, alongside Xerneas and Salazzle over on Jamie's side. That Salazzle probably in the position it wants to be, staring down as Xerneas.
Oh, definitely. If it knows something like the Sludge Bomb, that's going to be a huge threat in this turn one. And it's also just a very interesting variation on this Xerneas Incineroar lead in general. You know, you don't get access to the Intimidate ability, but you do have access to something like a Fake Out. You're going to be faster than that Incineroar. So if Jamie wants, he could Fake Out the opposing Incineroar and then Geomancy on his own Xerneas to match the threat of a Geomancy on Melvin's side of the field. But instead, just going immediately to the offense.
Yeah, the Xerneas on yeah, what's Jamie's side? Starting out with the Moonblast. Incineroar going with the Snarl, making sure as much damage as possible gets removed from play, essentially. It doesn't deal as much, but making sure the options are very limited in how it goes. That's something I'm excited to see come to the fore. We're going to just get through that pretty sluggish turn, I guess. Nothing that explosive in this one, but Jamie just shows he wants to start dealing damage. He's not worried about that traditional set up the Geomancy on Xerneas. He feels it's much more important to get some damage down, maybe to make sure he hits the numbers with something like Salazzle.
And having that Incineroar go immediately for the Snarl instead of something like a Fake Out, I think also was just a great defensive move by Melvin in a situation where his Fake Out probably wouldn't have afforded him as much.
Right. Would have slowed the game down a bit, but that Xerneas, after taking good damage in turn number one, has decided to switch out in place of the Primal Groudon for Melvin, so making sure he lets Jamie know he's bought both his restricted Pokemon. No questions really asked there. Sunlight turning harsh, nothing new. Salazzle does Sludge Bomb. That's going to head towards Groudon. Not the preferred target there, but a decent little amount with a critical hit on that not very effective attack. Xerneas over on Jamie's side this turn does opt to Geomancy, so one Snarl has already been kind of removed from play. A second one may bring it back down to a more neutral level of attack, exactly where it started. But that special defense could be really, really important, depending on how this Groudon is trained. I think a lot more of the Groudon we've seen today have been physical, but there's always that chance that it may help you out a little bit down the line.
And it would have been really unfortunate if Jamie got caught by a second Snarl there, just because that Xerneas, yes, it would have been very fast, it would have had its defenses up, but I don't think it would have had the offensive prowess needed to sort of power through this Incineroar and this Groudon. I think that Salazzle is going to be forced to switch out this turn, just given how little that Sludge Bomb did. unless it has like a fire type move that it might want to use to take advantage of the sunlight here. But overall, just not the best matchup for that Pokemon. So now Xerneas can at least do something during this turn. You know, maybe bring that Groudon a little bit closer to getting knocked out, or otherwise get a nice amount of chip damage down onto that Incineroar.
Well, Xerneas just left there. The Salazzle leaving, saying, I'll come back later. Groudon keeping itself safe for this turn with a Protect. Doesn't want to take any big damage, even though it resists a lot of it. Xerneas will Dazzling Gleam. Its special attack not where it usually is after a Geomancy because of that early Snarl, but still going to be a little bit more damage on this Incineroar. Most importantly, Incineroar will land a Flare Blitz, no problem there, and we saw exactly how much it did in turn 1 or turn 2, and in turn 3 it gets the knockout. There's going to be some real core damage on that Incineroar. Not enough to activate the Berry right now, but the Pokemon lead immediately falling in Melvin's favor.
And, you know, a nice try by Jamie there, getting that Intimidate down onto the field. You know, definitely weakened that Incineroar's Flare Blitz, even though it didn't end up making a difference in terms of the knockout. This Necrozma, though, you know, it's in its Duskmane form, which means it does have that Steel Psychic typing right now. I think it's almost going to be forced to Ultra Burst here if that is the kind of Necrozma that Jamie has brought to this battle.
I do not think Jamie would have bought this with him if it wasn't the Ultra Necrozma. You can't bring it in front of a Groudon and expect to do well off that. The Groudon leaves the field though, and Salamence comes in for Melvin. So he's going to get an Intimidate down, may become important, depending on exactly how Jamie decides to proceed with this Duskmane Necrozma. The Mega Salamence coming to the fore on Jamie's side of the field. His has obviously been in a turn longer, so he's able to take advantage of that, get Salamence into its Mega form, get the access to the Aerialate ability, and of course the second transformation this turn is the Duskmane Necrozma. Going to become Ultra Necrozma. No real shock there, but just confirmation that Jamie is going on the offense. Its true power is there, and the Necrozma tries to Earth Power, not connecting. Of course, Groudon would have been the preferred target there, and the Double Edge from Salamence makes the turn a little better for him. He gets rid of Incineroar, but he really wanted to get a knockout on Groudon there, I feel.
Yeah, and I think that means that Melvin's just going to have to be even more careful about if he decides to bring that Groudon back. You know, I like him sending in the Xerneas here. You know, in terms of all the Pokemon that he could have sent in, I think Xerneas definitely has the most offensive advantage due to the fact that Jamie's Pokemon are both Dragon-type Pokemon right now. But that Groudon would have been heavily threatened by the Earth Power from that Necrozma. So just good positioning. But, you know, his Xerneas is already down to half of its health. I think it's going to be up to its partner Salamence to sort of try and clear a little bit of a path through for Melvin. I don't think Xerneas is in a position where it can get a Geomancy up and maybe outspeed some of these Pokemon. So if Salamence has something like a Tailwind, maybe now would be the time to try and activate it, or otherwise just go straight for the Moonblast onto Jamie's Salamence and hope that that little bit of chip is enough for it to knock it out.
Well, Xerneas is going to keep itself safe. That early damage makes it a lot more manageable for knockouts. Salamence on Melvin's side revealing Tailwind. No real shock there, but if Jamie hasn't matched it, the next turn could get treacherous. We are going to see a big Z move coming out, so no hesitation on this one. I think Jamie just trying to make sure he gets enough damage down as Necrozma goes for its Z move. We've seen it a couple times this weekend, more than any other tournament we've had in the Ultra format. Of course, it will be the light that burns the sky. You probably want to see it go towards Salamence, so you at least get a knockout, because the Protect could be really valuable for this Xerneas.
Yeah, but that also will work in Melvin's favor starting the next turn, since that would be an opportunity for his Groudon to get onto the field in a situation where it should outspeed the other Pokemon, but unfortunately targeting down that protecting Xerneas instead. And you know, I gotta say, this was probably the only move that could have potentially knocked out this Xerneas in a way that would have allowed the Ultra Necrozma to stay on the field. So it was a great prioritization by Jamie, but Melvin was just thinking a turn ahead.
Yeah, even with the critical hit, the Protect is so important, but key for Jamie here, he did decide to match the Tailwind over on his side with his own Salamence, and I think that means that turn really isn't that bad. You've got Xerneas very, very low. You know, you still need to maybe try and find an answer to this Salamence in there. That's going to be a concern, but the Xerneas being matched in speed, both the Tailwinds up. I mean, both these players are essentially back where they started. It's going to expire on the same turn, so there's no opportunity to stall and look for something that way. And this Xerneas is now real easy to knock out.
Yeah, and fortunately for Jamie, you know, that Salamence isn't known to be running Dragon-type moves at this point in time. I think some trainers like to run something like a Draco Meteor on them, but overall, you know, Double Edge is the move of choice, as we see Melvin target down the opposing Salamence with that. So Necrozma, as a result, does get the opportunity to go ahead and pick up that knockout onto something.
Yep.
In this case, the Salamence.
Yeah, just tidies up. Another critical hit for Jamie Boyt. He's been racking them up in this game. I don't think any of them have been too important, but the key for him right now, Salamence is still free to knock out this Xerneas, and that's going to leave a 3v1 situation with Groudon trying to take on the world. We've already seen Earth Power from Necrozma, so it looks like Jamie Boyt is just going to wrap this game up really tidily. Attacking into the Protect actually seems to be the most preferred play.
Yeah, that definitely put that Xerneas within KO range of the Double Edge and had the added benefit of ensuring the Salamence would not take as much damage in recoil when it did get that knockout onto the opposing Xerneas. So now, you know, Jamie does have these two Pokemon to target this Groudon. It's unlikely that he needs both attacks, since that Earth Power, like you said, is probably going to be enough to, you know, knock out this Groudon, if not this turn, before the Groudon can retaliate. And as a result, he goes ahead and takes game one.
Yeah, I mean, he did get a number of critical hits in that game, and I think Melvin a little bit peeved by that, perchance. Maybe looking to take a little less damage, you know, maybe concerned about some of the numbers that came through. But Jamie put himself in a fantastic position at a number of times in that game. I think the key turn for me, as simple as it sounds, matching the Tailwind, Melvin was never able to find that advantage.
Yeah, and that's probably the most important thing about running Tailwind on your team, especially in this Ultra format. If your opponent is able to get Tailwind up and you're just unable to match it or otherwise mitigate it somehow with something like a Trick Room or at least two Icy Winds or Electro Webs or, you know, speed drop moves of your choice, I guess, it really just puts you at a huge disadvantage for that period of time in that game, because these Pokemon are so powerful. You know, when these restricted Pokemon are allowed out onto the field, hypothetically, Tailwind is all they need to take a speed advantage and then just deal that huge damage to your party.
Right. I mean, if Tailwind had gone up for Melvin and his Xerneas was sat there with just the Tailwind on his side, he would have been able to start Dazzling Gleaming and I think
that
seal
would have
up
been
that
enough,
game.
yeah.
But Jamie played it safe, played it smart. You know, said if Xerneas protects, I'll still hit you. I'm going to use the Z move, make you easier to knock out later. But the key point in that turn is I'm going to make sure I get a Tailwind of my own setup.
Yeah, and and I just really think that's the mindset you have to have going into these games where, you know, your chance at top cut at the World Championships are on the line. Yes, you know, you might be able to win if you don't necessarily match the Tailwind, but, you know, play it safe. You can always make those big plays later, but in a game one situation, you know, I think that there's really no downside to playing that way. You know, maybe if you get some critical hits or something unlucky happens, it might not be the most optimal play, but, you know, you're essentially saying, I'm going to cover all my options, I'm going to match all of your options, and, you know, just try and keep this at a point where the game is more, you know, who's going to play what, as opposed to my Pokemon are faster, I click Eruption, or Precipice Blades, or, you know, move of choice here, and I win.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if Jamie gets any more value out of Salazzle, I think. It did actually a pretty good job getting a little bit of damage down on Groudon, providing that fake out pressure. I'm curious to see if there's any other tricks and treats up in its move pool, just because it gives you kind of another set of options. You mentioned a potential fire-type move. Maybe Melvin wants to play and be a little more cautious. I'm not going to give you the boost from the sun, because then you're in knockout range for a lot more. So we'll see if Melvin makes an adaptation. I don't think Shedinja's the right call.
No.
The team that Jamie bought was pretty good at dealing with that.
Yeah.
Really wasn't struggling in that regard at all. So.
Yeah, and Salazzle is one of those Pokemon that, you know, because you don't see it that often, you have to wonder if, you know, it does have sort of poison-type attack, fire-type attack, and then something else. But maybe we'll find out this game. I don't know.
I'm sorry, Jamie. I have to say this. This is one of the most ridiculous leads I've seen in a long time. If
Breloom as a lead works, I've seen it work many times. I've lost to it many other times.
You've got two of the most powerful Pokemon in the format staring you down in Primal Groudon and Xerneas, and Jamie has the absolute audacity with his tournament on the line. He could advance into the final bracket. This is one of the most interesting moves I've seen in a long time. Just brings Breloom and Salazzle, two much smaller Pokemon in purely in stature.
It's okay.
But he's doing exactly what he needs to. We're going to see the fake out there onto the Xerneas.
And this is why that's okay.
Yeah, and the Groudon's asleep. So, yeah, they won. Well known at the top of this tournament. but that turn has gone absolutely perfectly for Jamie Boyt. The Groudon, which would usually threaten both these Pokemon in a big way, is not able to move for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and Breloom, you know, did move before the Xerneas that turn. So if Melvin didn't bring that Tapu Fini to this game, which he didn't the game before, that could mean the Xerneas is also about to take a nap. And this is what Breloom does. I mean, as threatening as an Amoonguss is under Trick Room, that's essentially the Breloom that's on the field right now, only without that one turn of setup. So if Jamie does go for the Spore onto that Xerneas, this is certainly the great time for him to then go for his own Geomancy in the next turn.
Oh, the absolute cheek of it. Jamie has now landed 2 Spores in 2 turns, and within the first 2 turns of the game, both of Melvin's Pokemon are asleep. This is one of the most audacious leads. It's a Pokemon that's very easy to knock out, but he's now got Melvin exactly where he wants him. Both his Pokemon are asleep, both of them aren't able to fight back, and that opens up the window for Xerneas to set up a Geomancy and be in the position it usually wants to. I do wonder if Breloom's going to be lacking maybe in offensive power and forced to switch out here, but now is the perfect time to switch out, right?
Yeah, I think you have to switch it out this turn, just because, you know, Groudon has had its mandatory turn of sleep. This is going to be going into turn 3 that it's been asleep on the field. Xerneas had its turn of sleep last turn, so if one of these Pokemon were to wake up here, this could be, you know, the moment where Breloom does get knocked out, but who knows, maybe putting these Pokemon to sleep just to open up the opportunity for this Geomancy is enough.
Yeah, well, Breloom's remaining on the field. Its partner is setting up the Geomancy power-up coming into play. That's going to be providing a huge amount of damage for the next few turns. And we'll see what Breloom decides to weave in here. We get to see a little bit more of its moveset. We'll see exactly what it can do. It starts out with a Bullet Seed.
Okay.
So Bullet Seed heading towards that Xerneas. Going to start wearing it down a little bit. We'll see exactly how many times it connects. There's 1, there's 2. It's slow and steady, only the 2. Not exactly what you want. And now we get to check the speed over on Melvin's side. Xerneas remains asleep, Groudon remains asleep, and I feel like Jamie is feeling pretty good about this opening.
Yeah, that Xerneas has a nice amount of chip damage on it. You know, Bullet Seed can hit up to 5 times, and I believe 2 is the minimum possible that it can hit. So a little bit of misfortune there, but really I think what he was looking for were for the Xerneas and the Groudon to remain asleep, which they did. So anything else on that is sort of a bonus.
So Breloom is still there to put things back to sleep if they woke up, right?
It's provided it's able to remain on the field. You know, Groudon or Xerneas is certainly more than capable of waking up and then bringing that Breloom, you know, either within knockout range or definitely knocking it out. It's just they have to wake up, and Jamie has to not knock out the Pokemon that goes on the offensive.
Well, this switch could get quite difficult. Melvin does reveal he has bought the Shedinja to this battle, so that's going to come in and deal with this Dazzling Gleam a whole lot better than the Xerneas was, because it doesn't take any damage. Wonder Guard keeping it safe. Groudon takes a decent little amount, but it's not very effective. Breloom's Bullet Seed will be heading this time towards the Groudon, so mixing it up there, putting himself in a good position. If Groudon wakes up, this game does change. We're under half. There's another one.
All right, there's 3. There's 3.
Oh, we're getting another one.
Okay, 4.
There it is.
4, 5.
All right.
Can we go for 5?
And there it is.
All right, 5.
So Jamie's had the high roll and the low roll on this one. That Groudon is going to be real easy to pick up. Obviously, Groudon does decide to wake up in retaliation. The Fire Punch coming through onto this Breloom. We are going to see the Breloom's Focus Sash is in play. So guess what? It's going to be around to Spore again in the future. But I mean, that Groudon taken really, really low by those Bullet Seeds from Breloom. This is only going to be able to pick it up with ease, but now Jamie kind of has to shift that mindset a little bit and start to figure out how to deal with Shedinja.
Yeah, Jamie does have that Salazzle still in the back of his party, so Breloom could easily target down that Shedinja with something like a Spore, put it to sleep, and then try and weave in the opportunity to send out that Salazzle onto the field. Assuming, again, it has a Fire-type attack, we still have only seen the Fake Out and the Sludge Bomb from it, and get that KO, but if Jamie's unable to do that, or if Melvin's able to knock out that Pokemon on the switch or prior to it attacking the Shedinja, then the Shedinja could be a win condition for him. You know, we've only seen 3 of Jamie's Pokemon. We don't know what that last Pokemon is, and, you know, looking at his party, I think it's unlikely that it would be able to even deal damage to that Shedinja. So this Salazzle really needs to remain on the field and really threaten that Shedinja if at all possible.
Where's the hidden power fire on Xerneas when you need it, right? Shedinja will Shadow Sneak. Nothing can really stop it from doing that. It'll land on the Salazzle. The Breloom was going to fall to that if it didn't switch out. So smart play there, I think, from Jamie to get that Salazzle in. Of course, Wonder Guard keeping it safe from Dazzling Gleam, along with the Protect on Groudon, keeping that safe from Dazzling Gleam. So this Xerneas really hasn't been allowed to capitalize off that Geomancy setup all that well.
But it's certainly still a threat, and the only reason that I think it's remaining on the field for as long as it has is because this Shedinja and this sort of defensive play style that Melvin's taken up to try and power through the Pokemon on Jamie's side of the field, it's just, you know, not giving it that opportunity.
Well, even though Jamie's been completely in control so far this game, he only just takes the first knockout of the game onto this Groudon. Does remove the harsh sunlight from play, and Salazzle reveals Overheat. No surprises, bringing a Fire-type move, and it's going to be more than enough to knock out Shedinja as long as it can hit it. When Shedinja keeps itself safe like that, you are going to struggle a little bit, and I guess the best thing for him right now is to just keep Shedinja safe for as long as possible. Incineroar is going to do a good job of that. At least it's awake. Xerneas in the back, of course, isn't from those earlier spores. But if you can burn that fake out, keep the Salazzle and Xerneas at bay for a little while, you can get yourself in a pretty good position with the Shedinja. You've got to deal with the Salazzle. You want to maybe try and get the Breloom away if you can, just so you don't have to deal with sleep later in the game. And whatever's last could really be the deciding factor on if Jamie has an answer to Shedinja.
I'm interested to see what Melvin's plan is for taking down this Salazzle. You know, Incineroar is not likely to hit that Salazzle for a lot of damage. Shedinja as well. You know, the Shadow Sneak did enough damage on it to, you know, put it within knockout range of something. But unfortunately, with that Groudon already knocked out, you know, there's not going to be a lot of super effective damage on the field for it. So I like Jamie's defensive play here. You know, the fake out could have knocked or could have flinched that Salazzle and given Shedinja the opportunity to go for a second Shadow Sneak. Rather just realizing I don't need Spore anymore. You know, maybe just keep that Salazzle safe. I guess it gets access to its fake out again next turn, which could be interesting, but still really needs to figure out how to stop this Shedinja.
Yeah, the Salazzle being forced back in after Breloom just switches around. The Pokemon count is equal at 3-3 now, but this really comes down to a case of board state and game positioning, right? It's always the case with Shedinja. If it's on the field and you have no answer to it, it's just going to start setting up Toxics. It's going to buy some time. It's going to really mess with you with the ally switch as well. So I think the onus really on Jamie Boyt here to make those considerations, to make those calls, and as long as he gets those right for at least a couple of turns, he's going to be able to put himself in a great position. He could play safe. He could Dazzling Gleam every single turn, but that's literally lowering his potential damage output. It does mean the threat of ally switch is limited though.
Yeah, and you have to remember that this Salazzle couldn't be poisoned by something like Toxic, so Shedinja might just be forced to keep Shadow Sneaking that slot in hopes that the Salazzle doesn't KO it first.
It's going to be so close to a 3-hit knockout as well. That's 2, and it's dangerously low. The Xerneas over on Jamie's side is Dazzling Gleaming though. The Xerneas takes a decent amount of damage, and Salazzle reveals Fling for us. And that's going to land onto the Shedinja, the Razor Fang there, the item of choice. Shedinja's Focus Sash is activated there as well. But that's enough, you know, it does that damage. The final move on Salazzle finally given up. Fling Razor Fang usually used to try and flinch your opponent there, but in this case it's used to keep Shedinja at bay. Yeah,
Fling is 100% accurate as opposed to that Overheat, so Jamie just playing it safe and saying, you know, maybe I won't start rolling for accuracy until after that Xerneas has been removed from your side of the field.
Right, and I think this is a really interesting term with Melvin playing it safe on the Shedinja, right? Because now Incineroar comes back in. That's forced in as the Xerneas is knocked out. Salazzle does try and Overheat, but all he really needs to do is make sure that the Salazzle gets saved maybe for another turn, avoid that fake out, which is a concern, reveal your last Pokemon, which may be an answer to Shedinja in and of itself if it's something like the Salamence, but just keep yourself in a great position. Your choices really are this: if you decide to go after the Salazzle, then with something like fake out Shadow Sneak, then you're going to have to deal with Xerneas.
Yeah, you have to think, though, we've seen all 4 of the moves on that Salazzle, you know, Sludge Bomb, Overheat, Fake Out, and Fling. So Jamie's only option here, if he wants to keep this Salazzle safe, would have been to switch it out, but instead it looks like he's keen to go on the offensive, and ally switch revealed on Melvin's side of the field, which could completely mess that up.
This comes down to see exactly how the Dazzling Gleam is being used. Dazzling Gleam was still coming through there. The Salazzle, though, does take the bait, essentially, and ends up overheating an Incineroar. It doesn't matter. It just needs to do 1 damage later on in the game, so I don't really think it's that important. But this Snarl could be putting the Salazzle dangerously low.
It out.
A critical hit does mean that a Shadow Sneak next turn is going to be more than enough, and that means Salazzle is, if that's the only answer to Shedinja, Jamie Boyt's not going to be able to get through the rest of this game.
Yeah, I think unfortunately for that Salazzle, though, it's time for it to get knocked out so Jamie can send in his last Pokemon sort of undamaged. You know, one would hope that it is that Salamence that we saw in Game 1 so that he could still potentially threaten that Shedinja, but if it's not, you know, he's definitely going to have a challenge here and he might not even be able to make it through that Salazzle, or that Shedinja, excuse me.
Well, unsurprisingly, Salazzle has been taken out of play. You've got to be hoping if you're Jamie, or maybe that's why he's okay with it, is just going to let it happen. Incineroar's Snarls are finally landing and dealing with that much earlier Geomancy that we saw in the game in special attack, back to where it started. And we'll see exactly what Jamie bought as his last Pokemon. Necrozma is going to be the choice, so looks like it's Shedinja's game.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, to me that Jamie just kept going for those Dazzling Gleams with that Xerneas, even though something more powerful, maybe like a Moonblast, would have, you know, actually had a chance to knock out that Incineroar. I think that might have been him just sort of seeing what other information that Melvin would have revealed to him, knowing that his last Pokemon was going to be that Necrozma, and as far as we know right now, unable to, you know, knock it out and sort of win him this game.
Yeah, I mean, the Xerneas has been sat there literally all game, right? It's so easy to just sit there and deal with it and not like do much, but the fact that it's only been able to attack essentially one Pokemon at a time has been such a concern for such a long time now. We'll see exactly what's going on. Obviously, Sunsteel Strike heading towards the Shedinja. The Protect there, meaning it's not quite able to get there. We'll see exactly if there's any easy answers.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'm curious about is, I mean, Jamie does have the Pokemon advantage right now, so he could be trying to run down the clock a little bit. Again, maybe see if there's any other information, maybe confirm whether or not this Shedinja does know Toxic, but given the fact that both these players just shook hands, I wouldn't be surprised if we're heading into Game 3. Just a couple of,
here's the Sunsteel Strike.
Sunsteel Strike.
The Dusk Mane and a Necrozma. There is, of course, some strange interaction. Shedinja not able to hold on through this one.
Yeah,